Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our event, and thank you to UN Watch and all the other co-organizers for hosting this very incredibly important and also meaningful event here in Geneva. My name is Joey Siu. I'm an activist, the policy advisor to Hong Kong Watch, and also the policy advisor to the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. I was born in the United States and moved to Hong Kong when I was really young. I grew up in Hong Kong, I attended college there, and I also became an activist in Hong Kong. And in late 2020, I had to flee Hong Kong under the increasing risk of political persecution. And after that, I decided to go to the States, and I have settled down in Washington, D.C. So Hong Kong has always been a very unique place, no matter that is to me personally or historically speaking. The city was once colonized by the UK. And in 1984, under the witness of the international community, the agreement on the future of Hong Kong was signed between the UK government and the Chinese government, setting the conditions of the handover of Hong Kong in 1997. The joint declaration came into force in 1985, and at the same year, it was registered by the two governments at the United Nations. It was promised that a special administrative region would be established in Hong Kong, and that our people in Hong Kong would be able to continue to self-govern with a high degree of autonomy while we maintain our existing governing economic systems, which are different and also separate from the systems in mainland China, under the one country, two system frameworks. With that, with Hong Kong as such a globalized international city, with our very well-established judiciary system, with our protection provided to our basic human rights and freedoms, Hong Kong continued to flourish as an international financial center. However, with that being said, I want you all to understand one thing. Hong Kong has never enjoyed an electoral democracy. We were never able to elect our leaders of the city. A considerable number of lawmakers were chosen by the Chinese government. The chief executive leader of our city is handpicked by Chinese officials in Beijing instead of the people in Hong Kong. And over the years, the people of Hong Kong have been trying hard to fight for democracy. We have been fighting for universal suffrage where we can really elect the leader of our city. But that attempt failed. We saw that the room for political discussion and expression has been shrinking under the oppression from the Hong Kong government and the Chinese government. But at that time, at least, there was still room for us to discuss. But then everything changed in 2019. Early 2019, the Hong Kong government introduced the Fugitive Offenders Amendment Bill on extradition, with the aim of establishing a mechanism that would allow any Hong Kong resident or any individuals in Hong Kong to be extradited to mainland China for trials. And that is a direct erosion to Hong Kong's independent judiciary and all of our core values. And fearing that from happening, Hong Kongers started taking on to the streets. On June 9, 2019, 1 million people took to the streets to protest against the Extradition Amendment Bill. On June 15, 2019, 2 million Hong Kongers took to the streets. We have to know that Hong Kong is a very, very, very tiny place. We have only got 7.5 million population, and 2 million is nearly 1/3 of our whole population. And when a city, when 1/3 of your population is like taking on to the streets, marching, you would expect the government to hear the people's demands. You would expect the government to respond to your demands. But that did not happen in Hong Kong. What came was severe police brutality. What came was all-round suppression from the government. At that time, I was in Hong Kong, I was an activist. I was organizing these protests, demonstrations, and also rallies. Sometimes I would be in the protests on the streets, marching, protesting against the government. Sometimes I have to take on the duty to provide legal assistance. And the police brutality was so brutal that every day we have Hong Kongers worrying about being beaten to death by the police in Hong Kong. I have saw protesters who were only 15, 16 at that time, asking me, hey, I know that you are one of the members of a student union in Hong Kong. Can I give you my phone number and also my personal information? If anything happens to me, tell my parents. Tell them that I was arrested, I was beaten by the police. Some of them even handed me their wills. I was 20 years old at that time, and these protesters were only 15, 16. They were in middle school, high schools, handing me their wills, saying that I have to go on the front lines, I have to do something for Hong Kong. And that was what happened in 2019. At that time, we thought it was bad enough because at that time we have got over 10,000 protesters arrested under ridiculous offenses, including rioting, illegal assembly, facing up to 10 years imprisonment. We thought that was bad enough, but then the Chinese government slapped us in the face. On July 1st, 2020, they introduced the national security law in Hong Kong. Under the national security law, any Hong Kong resident, any foreign individuals who are found to have violated the national security law under names of secession, subversion, terrorism, or collusion with foreign forces, they could be facing up to lifetime imprisonment in Hong Kong or in mainland China. I still remember very distinctly the night when the national security law came into force. At that time, I was helping a dear friend of mine, Owen Chow, with his election campaign in the Democratic primaries in Hong Kong. At that time, we were very, very worried because we know that the law is so broad, so vague. We do not know how exactly it is going to be executed in Hong Kong. The only thing we know is that if we continue with our election campaign, if we continue with our activism, we have to be ready to face the consequences of being imprisoned for a lifetime or being extradited to China or to go into exile. We paused our campaign for a week, and we took the whole week to think, to reflect, and think about whether we are really ready to face the consequences. After a week, after very long discussions, considerations, we decided to go on. And now you see me as an activist in exile. I left Hong Kong late 2020, and not so long after I left Hong Kong, Owen Chow himself was arrested by the National Security Bureau in Hong Kong for participating in the Democratic primaries, for subversion under the national security law. And alongside him, it was the other 46 pro-democracy activists who were also arrested. Most of them have been in jail since January 2021. It has been over a year. And what came with the mass arrest and arbitrary detention is the total crackdown and dismantling of the civil society in Hong Kong. We saw that civil society organizations, including labor unions, student unions, protest organizations being forcibly shut down. We saw that independent pro-democracy media, including Apple Daily, Stand News, being forcibly shut down. Journalists, activists, protesters, or even everyday Hong Kongers are forced to flee the city. Hong Kong has completely changed. But then seeing all of you here gathering, showing solidarity, showing support to Hong Kong, to East Turkestan, to Tibet, to the other regions and communities who are also under oppression, I feel very empowered. And I'm looking forward that with your support and solidarity, we will one day win the battle, win the struggle, and bring the glory back to our communities, to our people. Thank you.